Hello, can anybody hear me? Hello.
Yes, hello, who was speaking?
Okay, this is Betty. I was not hearing any sound, so I was worried.
I left a message on the chat. We're starting in 5 minutes. We just want people to sign up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, good evening. Okay, thanks for joining the session. We'll be starting soon. We just want to give enough people time to join. Thank you very much for joining.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have a speaker on the call, Mary. Hello, Mary. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Glory. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us and for coming to share your knowledge with us. So we have about 10 participants on the call. Would you like to start, or do you want to wait for some other people to join, or should we just kick off?
I think we can kick on. We're giving 5 minutes. Those who are late can join when they come in. We should honor those who've made the time to come in.
Early. Okay, fine. So fine. So we'll start right now.
Yes, we can start right now. Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, please, I would like to stop sharing so that you can project from your computer. Or
no, you should, Glory.
Okay,
share,
okay.
Please.
All right, that's fine. Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Her name is Mary Ekemezie. She's a seasoned legal practitioner and an expert on issues concerning employees and employers in the workplace. So she has graciously consented to come and share her knowledge with us today about how to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I would like to request that everyone puts their microphones on mute if they're not speaking. And then once her session is over, I think she will open up for questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mary Ekemezie and invite her to take over the call. The floor is yours, Mary.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for making out time to attend. And thank you, Glory, for graciously having me over to speak. Hopefully it won't be a long conversation. I have got three key slides, really. What we're looking about, what's brought this up, what we're doing. So in terms of introduction, we're going to be looking at the key concerns for an employment perspective for employers and for employees. And then I'm going to take lots of questions. I think that everybody has questions. This is a very new area. It's unprecedented. We're not quite sure what we're dealing with here. About me, I'm a legal practitioner. I've been one for 13 years now. I work with the law firm of Udoma and Bello, Osagie. And one of my key specializations is labor and employment, but I also do lots of M&A and regulatory compliance advice. So introduction. we're living in unprecedented times. There is global restriction of movements, which is unusual. So for people who live in conflict zones, it's very normal. But for the rest of us, it's actually very um, uneven is the word. You're just not able to go to where you would usually have been able to go to. Lagos in particular, for us, for those of us who live in Lagos, is like a dead street. I mean, it's unusual. You can count the number of cars on the road. You can go for hours without hearing anything. Businesses are shut. More people are working from home, not just opting to work. More people are working from home. In some places, work has stopped or there's very reduced output. Social distancing is now very much the new normal. We're having all the meetings online now. And the phenomenon behind all of this is something called COVID-19. It's a new pandemic that has the whole world just grappling, trying to understand what are we dealing with. And every day we're hearing new news about how it's developing, how it's and businesses. So my practice, we've gotten loads of questions, and some of the questions we're seeing from employers are what I'm going to be talking about this evening. So one key concern for employers is sustainability of business operations. They want to continue to do business. But they're wondering how is reduce output and what can we do in terms of retaining workforce. So I'm going to spend some time talking about each of these concerns. So closure of businesses. My law firm, as with all law firms in Lagos, are closed, and everybody's trying to do the work from home. So one of the things that businesses have to invest in now is in resources that allow employees to work from home and to work as optimally as possible. It means that there's going to be a lot more investment in your IT space. And for some cases, there's going to be investment in hardware, so laptops, so that employees can actually get that work done while they're at home. And all the conversations, I know some people are setting up WhatsApp calls, group chats. There's more use of Microsoft Teams. Skype is very useful now, and Zoom is also particularly useful. So there are loads of options for businesses to walk through the concerns arising from the closure of business. So it's not all bad. But the downside is that there's certain tasks that just cannot be done from home. So what do you do with those employees? Do you not pay them? Would you pay them? What do they do? Can you switch tasks for them? Part of what we're saying is that as far as possible, employers are trying to see, can we find alternative tasks for these employees who just cannot do the core of their work from home? Where that option isn't open, you have to consider whether you want. Some employers are, because it's still early times. I mean, the closure is for 2 weeks. We estimate we might be at home for about a month. And if at the end of the day, all you're doing is just being at home for 1 month, it's a question of, look, these are valuable employees. Am I happy to pay them 1 month's salary for quote unquote doing nothing? Another concern we're saying is, look, so everybody's at home. We have all of this hardware, software, all of the tools. How do we ensure that they're actually doing the work for which we've sent them home to do? How are we sure that that's what's going on? How are we sure that they're actually working from home? And I mean, it will vary from employer to employer, but one of the things you're going to be looking to do is to find an objective way of measuring whether the employees are actually doing the work for which they're being paid at home to do. If you have software that allows employees to log in their time entries, then you can check those time entries to see who actually is working. Another way to see if they're meeting their deliverables, which means you have to be copied on the work that they're doing so you can track whether they're meeting deliverables. You can also have regular check-in. from time to time to see if the employees are actually doing their work. Is certainly going to reduce output. It's particularly for employees who are parents. So working at home typically works because the kids were in school in the core business hours. The employees could be at home with very little distraction, and they could get some work done. Now employees are going to have to find a way to continue to do work while the kids are pretty much running around everywhere, and that will necessarily lead to reduced output. I know that employees are trying their best to sort of work around this. But one question that is I don't think has been addressed, and which might also be a function of this reduced output, is what happens to injuries that are caught at home, seeing the work has moved to the home front. How do you deal with that in the face of COVID-19? Is that an injury arising out of the place of work, or is that just an injury at home? And this is one of those ones that will be determined on a case-by-case basis. It depends really on the kind of work that the employee was doing, and what led. So if it's an employee who, for instance, is managing your IT network, and what he or she was trying to do was make sure that electricity was up and running so that they could ensure that the back end of all the software was running. Arguably, that was an injury. That is an injury that occurs in the place of work. They'll be entitled to some sort of compensation. And we move now to strategies for retaining workforce while managing costs. This is the biggest question that we are getting. What can we do? Can we just cut salaries? Can we ask employees to go on leave compulsorily? What options are available to us? The employees aren't working. And while we don't want to, so in some cases, some employers outrightly want a termination. Some employers want to retain employees on payroll or some form of payroll while contemplating how long this will last. I think the first thing I would say, because we've seen quite a number of interesting strategies out there, is that as with all unprecedented times, the first thing is to tread with caution. For while a number of the terminations we have seen now will be challenged, and I dare say a number of them will be challenged successfully. If we treat this COVID-19 as a disruption to work, is it a disruption to work that triggers a redundancy? And if it is a redundancy, what are your obligations in the context of a redundancy? If you treat it as having frustrated the contract, the question is, have the elements you need to give rise to frustration happened? For us in Nigeria, closure of business has only gone on for just a little over a week. For those in Lagos State in particular, over a week. And so is a week enough to trigger a frustration? I dare say I don't think so. So for retaining workforce, the first thing I would say to employers is, this is a time to have a conversation with employees. I do not think that employees are unreasonable. They recognize that that nobody envisaged this was going to happen, or that this was going to come to this. And particularly for those who need their workforce to continue to work with them when all of this blows over, as it will blow over. If you're contemplating amendments to the terms of condition, and one of the things we're saying is really in terms of, are we paying employees a reduced salary? Or we want to ask them to take annual leave compulsorily. If you want to go the route of asking them to reduce their salaries, you need their consent, because the employment contract is still subject to the principles of contract. And you cannot unilaterally vary that contract without consent of the employee. And while I am very much aware that what may just happen is that HR will simply issue some notice to employees and said, oh, going forward, this is how much we're going to pay you, X, Y, Z, Z, Z. Employees may not necessarily say anything now, but this will blow over. And then there is going to be record cases of litigation flying around everywhere. So to mitigate today those litigation, which is disruptive to business and is also very expensive. You have, depending on the size of your workforce, the cost could be very significant. What we would recommend is that you engage with the employees regarding strategies for retaining them, but managing their costs. So one of such options is to say, look, if at the end of April, this isn't blowing over, we're certainly going to be reducing salaries by so long. And you have the employees agree to that. Or you could agree to suspend the employment contract now with the intention that you pick it up later. The question that arises if you do that is what happens, particularly for those who have defined benefits, what happens to gratuity benefits computation? This question will also arise if you're reducing benefits. So what month's salary are you going to use for computing benefit, for gratuity, for instance? For those who are entitled to long service award, will the suspension affect the long service award? These are questions that have to be addressed upfront. If you want the employees to proceed on compulsorily, first starting point is look at the contract of employment. What does this say? A number of the contract of employment typically will give the employer some sort of measure of control over when the employee goes on leave. And so you might want to ask them to take a portion of their leave or all of them. Bearing in mind, however, that if you're asking an employee to go on leave, then it means that employee cannot work while they're on leave. So if you want the employee to continue to work during this period, then you can't be asking them to go on leave. Because this is a compulsory stay at home for everybody, even if you're asking employees to go on leave, another concern you have to have at the back of your mind is the fact that employees may later in the year, when things resume, require time off. How will you deal with that? Is it going to be unpaid time off? Or is it going to be paid? What exactly is going to happen? Will the employee even be able to take time off at that period? An option you may also want to consider is asking employees to utilize their sick leave now, ostensibly on the grounds that, well, this COVID-19 is a sick leave, everybody's on compulsory sick leave, so use their sick leave. You must also comply with the terms of the contract. So it's very important now, particularly for employers, just to reduce the flurry of litigation in the future, that you comply as much as possible with what is in your contract, and that you carry your employees along. Just try as much as possible to get their buy-in. And like I said, employees are not unaware of this difficult time, so they're not particularly unreasonable. And those are concerns for those whose businesses have been shut down largely. Now, for those who are continuing to provide essential services, we've got the markets, we've got the power sector, hospitals, service providers, medicals and health service providers, food, all those in the food industry. Two key concerns are we have to continue to provide essential services. How do we guarantee our employees' safety as they commute to and fro? Bearing in mind, I have to flag this, that if you look at the Employees Compensation Act, I'll call that ECA for short in this discussions. The ECA expands the definition of workplace. Workplace now means not just the office where they work, but the commute from home to work, the commute from work back to home, and the commute to where the employee has lunch usually, and if you know, and the employee's secondary home, this comes into play particularly for those employees who have two homes, who live in Lagos and work outside of Lagos, and includes the bank, for instance, where the employee goes to get money. So in this time when, and given what we know about COVID-19 that is also airborne, how do you guarantee the safety of your work, of your employees? If an employee who's in the business of providing essential services falls ill, what is the employer's liability? What do you also do when an employee who is working for you shows symptoms of having contracted COVID-19? What are your obligations in that respect? So just spending a bit more time on that, I think the starting point is to, as far as possible in the workplace, maintain the distance recommended by NCDC and WHO. It's between 3 meters, anything between 2 to 6 meters. While I know that may disrupt, particularly for those in the business of manufacturing, what you have to weigh that against is having a flurry of suits if employees fall ill because they say, well, you didn't provide a safe workplace. The second thing that you also want to do is, have notices up reminding employees to wash their hands regularly and at least every 3 hours. So that's something, again, if it's in the factories space, that's something that the foreman or the supervisor should be reiterating, and also to some extent ensuring compliance with. Providing face masks if possible, making sure that those face masks are safe. You also don't want to get into liability for face masks that are already contaminated. And absolutely having running water and hand sanitizers at very strategic places that are easily accessible. If you provide transportation, this may be a time to sort of work how people sit. So the guidance of the Lagos State government might, even though it was provided as a public transport, it also I would also say applies to you, just so you can demonstrate, particularly as an employer, that look, it took steps. Another option is to consider whether to discontinue just providing that transportation now and just providing transport to the employees, transport allowances to the employees. If an employee does, turn up at work with symptoms, with COVID-like symptoms, and then may not necessarily be COVID-19 symptoms, they may not be, but it's advisable to err on the side of caution and require that employee to stay off work. And monitor themselves. If an employee actually has tested positive, then you absolutely need to ask all the other co-employees, and individuals who came in contact with that employee to stop work and to observe social distancing and shut down that premises and just disinfect it before you resume operations. These are some of the strategies that we would recommend employers take during this time if you're continuing to provide services. Now, if you're an employee, there are 4 things I know that you're concerned about. If you're an employee who's continuing to work, the key question is safety. I want to be safe. Just before the lockdown happened, a common concern was, look, why we stop coming to work? And that was a question you heard from many people. Shouldn't we be working at home? We hear this thing can be contracted from just even in a public space. So while employers, of course, are enjoined to provide a safe workplace, employees themselves also have to ensure that they're taking steps to keep themselves safe. So it's crucial to maintain those social distancing. To take all of the tips. So if you actually are feeling symptoms, COVID-like symptoms, just let your employer know that, look, I think, I'm not quite sure, but I would like to stay at home for 14 days and observe this. And that's from a safety perspective. If you can, as far as you can, if you're an employee, you might be better off if you can, driving yourself to work, and not sharing your. I mean, unfortunately, this is a time to be selfish. I'm really sorry to say, but it may not necessarily be safe for you unless you're both sure that you're COVID-19 negative to be sharing cars, because you're not able to maintain the 3 meters social distance required. The second concern is job security. I need slashes to salaries, terminations, some of the terminations have happened just right after the announcement from the government. I do not think that those terminations happened in accordance necessarily with the contracts of employment of the affected individuals, but that's a story for another day, and that's up to the employees to decide how they want to take that forward. But options that open to employees now is to open conversations with employers in terms of, look, what are you saying? What are your concerns? What would you like us to do? How do you want us to? How can we support you during this process? It may then mean that as an employee, you're going to be willing to take a pay cut just so you're sure of a guaranteed income until things resume. Or you may be willing to sort of change tax because your core function is something you cannot do at home, but there are ancillary tasks that you can do at home. You may be willing, you may have to be open to doing that just so you have a job until this blows over. Where employees are required to work from home, because we live in a country where we do not have 24 hours electricity supply, and there is some cost to data. It's a conversation employees have to have with employers around what's going to happen. So of course, I mean, I would expect that employees will apply to the cost of providing alternatives, electricity supply, the money that they would have used for their commute. But if our electricity providers are anything to go by, I know that money may not suffice actually. So employers have to think about how much of this cost can we meet. I don't think that they can meet everything, but they have to think about how much of it can they meet. Because I mean, part of your duty is to provide the work tools. Yes, the employee has to work from home. Yes, they're willing to meet you halfway, but you also do not want them going bankrupt. So that's a conversation that has to happen. And then, the last bit is changes to terms of employment. As I said, there's going to be quite a number of disruptions to the employee terms, from requiring employees to take paid leave of absence, salary reports, reduced work hours. All of us require engagement between both the employer and the employee. And that is the best way to mitigate disputes when this is over. If this process of changing the terms of employment is not handled with the employees in mind, what's going to happen when this blows over? There's going to be a flurry of litigation in court. For employees who are members of a trade union, the employers have to start that engagement now. The trade unions, my experience with them is that all they're concerned about is how much money the employees are getting, how they're going to keep getting their check dues. So of course, any changes to the terms of employment which reduces employees' take home will necessarily affect their check of dues. So there's a bit of slight conflict of interest there, because their concern will be, look, let's continue to keep this employment as is. But I expect the employees who are members to have an honest conversation with the trading officials and say, hey, look, our focus is to ensure we have a job when this blows over, as opposed to getting all the money we can get now. and then we don't have a job because they let us go. So I suppose I'm saying to employees, be amenable to the fact that if this process continues, even at the end of April, this is continuing, then there's going to be a conversation around how are we going to continue to engage. So to be open about that option and to make the process of negotiating a compromise between both parties easier will help all the parties involved navigate this process. And that's all I have really on this. So all I wanted to speak about was strategies that will help all parties manage this, what you can implement, what you should look out for, what to do to mitigate litigation when this is over. So if you have questions, I'm open to questions you may have.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary. That was very insightful and gave a lot of practical insights that everyone, whether you're an employee or an employer, can take away to address some of their key concerns in this area. So I would like to open up the floor at this point to questions. If anyone has any questions for Mary, please indicate by raising your hand on the chat or typing your question in the chat box. And then, okay, we have Betty Egbona. Okay, thank you. So there you go. Please, can you ask a question? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glory. Thank you so much, Mary. I mean, what an exciting presentation. But my problem here is, in Nigeria, as we all know, do you really think that any employer, would not succumb to a pay cut rather than losing the job completely? Why do I say that? You talked about having a kind of a discussion with your employees, but we know that in Nigeria, not many people will do that, particularly when it's a one-man business. I've heard about many people complaining about their employers telling them to go home and then get their salary cut, or some have been told that, you know what, we cannot pay you fully for this month. We will take a percentage after the salary and then pay you later on when things blow over. In this situation, do we really, as an employer in Nigeria, have any right at all to decide?
Okay. So what I will say is that what you're saying, I know is happening. What I'm also saying to the employers, I know is, look, you cannot unilaterally vary this contract. The employees may say nothing to you now, but this will blow over, as we all know. So guess what's going to happen? You're going to have, first of all, you have disloyal employees who will, while they are sitting at home, be looking for jobs. As soon as they find those jobs, they're going to walk away. And some of them may be key to your employment, key to your business, which is not good for you. That's one disadvantage. Secondly, they may just resume, and having secured work from elsewhere, you'll have litigation. Or they may wait because all the courts are home, particularly for those who've been terminated, and then go to court and say, well, the termination was really a redundancy. In addition to just trying to get a hang of business following the closure, following the resumption of business operations, you're having to deal with litigation. You're having to deal with disgruntled employees. In the long run, conversation helps. But I recognize that some employers are not going to take. I recognize some employers will not take that option. And so all I can say is that when this blows over, such employers will have tons of litigation on their hands. And so they will end up paying lawyers, by the way, to go to court. So was it really the best way to go? I'm not quite sure. Having a conversation is absolutely the way to go.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that, Mary. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, it seems at this point, okay, someone has posted has a chat in the. Okay, yeah, someone made a request for a recording. Yes, just to confirm that the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with participants and invitees shortly after it ends. So, well, Mary, thank you very much. Seems to have come to the end of today's session. I would like to say we had an impressive turnout. I think we had more than 30 to 40 people dial in, and that just shows how topical the issue is and how close it is to everyone's heart. So I'm sure everyone got a lot of value from this presentation. If you would like to contact Mary subsequently, either for advice, conversation, or any projects, you can find her on LinkedIn, Mary Ekemezie, or on other social media channels such as Facebook and Twitter. So thank you very much, Mary. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to everyone, I want to wish you a good evening and a safe period during this COVID era. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Good night.
Good night.